Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Ask Dr. Be Good show, the show where we bring you the politics, the pedagogy, and the practice around public education. And as always, boy, do we have a lot to talk about. And I thought I'd start today with an article that I was actually interviewed on the radio for Heart Radio on Thursday because this caught their eye, and I have been their sort of education go-to person for the last couple years. So let's start with lunch police in Pennsylvania school to search and confiscate student food. Now, that sounds that, as always, those headlines are made to create attention, and certainly it got the attention of radio stations. But let's talk about what this school is doing. One Pennsylvania school is taking a stand against snacking after an excessive amount of goodies was brought in, according to school officials. Shopping bags full of chips, candy, and assortments of drinks have been brought into the school at the Aliquippa School District, and they will not stand for it any longer. Aliquippa Junior Senior High School will now be limiting what each student can bring to school, the district statement said. Beginning Monday in April, each student will only be permitted one bag up to 4 ounces in size of such items as potato chips, Cheetos, Doritos, and one bottle or canned beverage up to 20 ounces, the school system announced. If the snack is opened before entering the school building or the student has more than what is permitted, the school personnel will throw the snack away. Additionally, if a student packs a lunch, same restriction applies and lunches will be searched. Oh. Of course, as you can well imagine, this announcement set off an uproar of comments on their Facebook page, on the school's Facebook page. You're going to tell parents what they can and cannot send for their children to eat? That's absurd. And maybe if school lunches weren't so tiny and gross, they wouldn't need to bring extra snacks, one person commented. Lunch police, said another commenter. Maybe they should stay out of the parenting business and focus on giving our kids a quality education. Some, though, parents did agree with the policy, and that is, I don't remember being allowed to have food outside the cafeteria when I was in school, and I find it weird that the school district even has to request this, said one parent. The school district had a message to all of its commenters. Thank you for your feedback. If you have children in the district, please contact your building principal. If you're an internet heckler, continue as you were. Now, also, what was the problem is that kids were bringing these snacks to sell. And so, that's not the reason we have school, right? For kids to be able to sell snacks, and especially when they're unhealthy snacks. Now, I will tell you, the thing I talked to the radio folks about was that it's always good for the school to do a better job to communicate with parents, right? And this was a high school. It probably would have been a good idea to start talking to those high school kids instead of just putting up a rule without getting input and at least just some connection and communication with these high school kids, with the parents, so that they're not hearing it for the first time on a Facebook post from the school. Would probably be a good idea. But that's why I've always won any case I help parents with to advocate, because the schools don't always do what they're supposed to do. So the lesson learned here, hopefully, is that the school will communicate and do a better job communicating with its kids, with its parents around, in this case, school lunch, because school lunches are inadequate. That was something that used to frustrate me. When you're part of the free and reduced lunch program, the National School Lunch Program, it is very frustrating because it's so restrictive. And I will tell you that the same portion is given to an 8th grader as a kindergartner. The portion only increases in 9th grade. Well, that's ridiculous. Have you seen some of our 8th grade kids? Our 8th grade boys can be huge, and they're getting the same amount of food as a kindergartner. So are they hungry? Yeah, especially if they're in sports, right? So all of these things need to be looked at and possibly used as a school project with kids to approach those bureaucrats in the free lunch program and say, hey, we want to talk to you from the student standpoint, student voice around some of the restrictions. That would be a great school project. Okay, I thought you all would enjoy knowing what's sort of crazy stuff going on in other states, but let's talk about, and this caused because we're not done talking about the impact that COVID has had on school and school kids. And so let's talk about the 10 states where most in-person learning occurred during COVID. Learning losses caused by pandemic-era school closures could result in a 3% decline in lifetime earnings for students. That's a lot of money, folks, especially if you graduate high school, college, and have a good, strong career. That could amount to thousands of dollars. So let's see what we have here. School closures may ultimately prove to be the most costly policy decision of the pandemic era. That is the somber conclusion made by researchers taking a fresh look at the economic and other impacts of COVID. Countless data have shown low COVID transmission rates in schools, while another study found that learning losses caused by pandemic-era school closures could result in that 3% decline in lifetime earnings for students, according to the National Bureau of Economic Research. So they have a new report card on state COVID performance, and I can put that website in the comments. More starkly, they noticed life expectancy for high school graduates is 4 to 6 years longer than for high school dropouts, while the global school closures in the first half of 2020 are associated with a staggering 13.8 million years of life lost. They also suggested that these education-related impacts could have been prevented or mitigated. Yikes. Closing public schools was entirely under the control of policymakers, they said. Almost all private schools were open. And of course, low transmission rates in schools, aided greatly by mass social distancing and a range of other safety precautions, were not obvious at the outset of the pandemic. So it'll be interesting to see that data as it comes out between the private school learning, possibly less learning loss because they stayed open more than public schools. Though just about all districts shut down for the end of the 2019-2020 school year, officials in some states, many led by Republican governors and legislators, moved aggressively to open in person for the fall of 2020. Several other states and large districts, such as California and Chicago public schools, remained completely virtual, while many others started the first full pandemic school year with staggered hybrid instruction. And that's what we did. My last year, we asked parents, and parents volunteered to send their kids or to stay home. So we had hybrid. Well, I say that we had kids who were learning at home, not kids coming during the week. It was either you come and you stay all week or you learn at home. The states where schools were most successful at remaining open include some of the most populous and some of the most rural. Wyoming, Arkansas, Florida, South Dakota, Utah, Nebraska, Montana, Texas, North Dakota, Louisiana. The 10 states with the least in-person learning, starting at the bottom: California, Oregon, Maryland, Washington, Hawaii, New Mexico, Virginia, and Illinois, Nevada, and New Jersey. These states were also more likely to enforce wider lockdowns that caused poor economic performance. However, the more restrictive states did show slightly lower mortality rates. Economy and schooling are positively correlated, which suggests a relationship between the willingness of the population or its politicians to resume normal activity in business and school, the report said. So let's have a fresh look at learning loss. The numbers continue to show that some students fall farther behind when school is interrupted, such as by COVID closures and summer break, according to a roundup of research done by the testing company NWEA. In K4, for example, English learners had lower test scores than their classmates, but showed growth in similar or at greater levels. But students who need more EL services, English language services, lose more ground over summer than even multilingual peers who were English learners at some point during the early grades. Rural students, meanwhile, enter kindergarten with stronger math and reading skills than their non-rural peers, but that achievement declines and falls behind by the end of third grade. Rural students grow at slightly faster rates in math and reading than other students when school is in session, but lose more ground almost every summer. That's interesting. So the outlook with students with disability is similar. While they start in school behind in math and reading, they may gain similar to or higher than their classmates, but also lose ground when school is out, causing widening achievement gaps. Our research analysis revealed reasons for both optimism and concern, said Lindsay Dworkin, NWEA's Vice President of Policy and Advocacy. While the findings disrupt some long-held deficit-based thinking about some of these student groups, they also demonstrate the proportionate impact that learning interruptions have on their achievement in the long term, making high-quality summer school learning opportunities and other interventions critical. And so this is really an important takeaway here, parents. If you've not made sure that your child is getting tutoring, if you've not made sure that your child goes to summer school, teachers work really hard to make summer school fun. That people try to make tutoring engaging, but even just reading at home with your students, making sure that they're getting some kind of academic stimulus in an engaging way can only help. All students have had learning loss. Some more than others, of course, but taking advantage of what the school is offering and really what the school is getting paid by the federal government to offer, which is much more tutoring. It's summer school. Take advantage of that. Let kids go, because especially the summer school is usually half a day. So it's half a day and then they come home and can chill and swim and whatever. But it's really important that we take advantage of the interventions that are being offered to all students, because it's just not been a good 3 academic school years. And just to reinforce that, here's I don't understand anything. Thanks to the pandemic, schooling college students fail math. So let's start with a story. Andrea Hernandez studied the multiplication table nearly every day during the summer between her 3rd and 4th grade years. Sitting at her family's kitchen table in Dallas, she printed the arithmetic over and over in a yellow spiral-bound notebook. When she started at a new school that fall, she breezed through the timed math test. From then until the coronavirus hit, when she was a 16-year-old pre-calculus student, Hernandez shined in class. So here's a young lady. She started really as a 3rd and 4th grader, really using her time at home to do multiplication tables. And then when she was 16, she was in pre-cal. COVID hit. Then, like millions of other students across the country, Hernandez was forced to shift to online learning. For the rest of her junior year and most of her senior year, she learned from a laptop in her family's living room with her younger sibling taking Zoom classes down the hall in their shared bedroom. She felt she lost her muscle for being a student. The standard for online learning during her junior year the standards weren't just lower than they'd been in the classroom. She said the standards weren't even there at all. By a slim margin, Hernandez, a math major, failed the math placement test that would have landed her a seat in calculus in the fall as a first-year student in the University of Texas at Austin. She retook pre-cal and earned an A. Now she spends 4 days a week in an unusually small seminar-style calculus class with 31 other aspiring mathematicians and engineers. I want to say that it's good so far, but there's just some things that where I look at them and I'm like, where's math? I don't see letters. I don't understand anything. I just sit there and I'm lost. More than 20 of her classmates in that calculus seminar took the larger lecture style class and they failed. Many students whose last years of high school were disrupted by the pandemic are struggling in the foundational college courses they need to succeed later in their academic and professional careers. Professors and students say the remote learning that students were stuck with during the pandemic wasn't as good as what they would have had in person. And, they were distracted. They were trying to learn while grappling with health, with financial and family stressors while home. So now, after 2 years of cobbled together pandemic learning, many college students are not only less prepared than they should have been, but have even forgotten how to be students. And the more underprepared high school graduates are, it's putting unprecedented pressure on faculty, counselors, and advisors. So, of course, low-income and students of color were hit the hardest. Hernandez's math professor, Uri Treisman, is nationally known for his techniques and philosophies for teaching calculus. For his class, he specially selects at-risk students like Hernandez who might benefit from his approach. He said that the fall 2021 semester of the first-year calculus was the most difficult he had had in his 50-year history. I mean, imagine, so he must be 75 and he's still teaching? Wow. His students were making basic errors in algebra and trigonometry from the beginning. Despite Treisman doing all he could do to help, about 25% of his students failed in the fall, compared to 5% usually in an ordinary year. Instead of emails from students asking for letters of recommendation, Treisman's inbox was flooded with emails from students anxious to retake his class, apologizing for poor performance and for being unprepared. It was really hard emotionally because we know the stakes for our students, Treisman said of himself and his co-professor, Erica Winterer. Their failure is my failure, and that's a good teacher. If they didn't get it, I didn't teach it the way they needed it to be taught. From the tiniest kindergartners to college-ready high school seniors, nearly all students had their education disrupted starting March 2020. As a result, the full scope of the college unpreparedness problem is not yet known. Even so, educators and experts worry that students from historically underserved backgrounds could be disadvantaged even further by this disruption. Economic fallout from the pandemic hit low-income Americans, people of color, and people without college degrees the hardest. So students from families in these groups are more likely to come to college having faced greater challenges over the past 2 years than their peers. Here and everywhere around the world, the wealthy are concerned and nervous about the futures of their children, so they're investing heavily in ensuring that their children have an advantage. So that nervousness requires that those who care about equity work much harder, said Treisman. Even in a normal year, students don't all show up with the same level of preparedness or knowledge base, but because of the pandemic, his students are contending with a different type of stressor than they otherwise would have. So again, this just reinforces in the different levels of what the impact has been of the pandemic. I've read about kids coming in, kindergarten kids who were supposed to know by the end of kindergarten their letters and their numbers, coming in totally not ready to be in the first grade, right? And story after story. And what do we need to do about that? Well, one of the things we need to make sure we do about that is make sure kids learn to love reading. You say, what does reading have to do with all this? Reading has to do with everything. If we at home can get our kids to love reading, they will turn out okay. I once went to a renowned linguist and grammatician, I don't know what you call it, grammatician, and he said if he had his druthers, grammar would not be taught until 9th grade. The only thing that would be taught between pre-K and 8th would be reading and the love of reading. So, and I'll tell you, it was ironic. My daughter moved to Georgia to sort of a town that didn't have a good public ed system, and so she had to put her daughter in a private school. And the private school was not happy with the fact that her daughter had arrived without knowing how to do blends and so forth. And you know, I they wanted to hold my grandchild back because the child did not know her blends. And I was talking to, I was part of the conversation. I asked my daughter if I could be part of that conversation with the teacher and the headmaster. And I shared with them the fact that this renowned linguist had just very recently, a few days before, mentioned how grammar should not be forced like this. But they wouldn't have it. You know, they had their school curriculum, and but really teaching the love of reading leads to being able to read the things they need to read in other areas. So just an interesting aside. And to follow up with our conversations that we've been having about teachers, teacher burnout, here is a Texas school district is going to adopt a 4-day work week. A Texas school district will adopt a 4-day work week for students during the upcoming school year. So that would be the 22-23 school year, citing teacher burnout and shortages in part during the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. The Jasper Independent School District, located in eastern Texas, confirmed last month that they will switch to a 4-day model during the 2022-23 school year. The school district shared on Facebook that the calendar will satisfy the 75,600 minutes required for students during a school year in Texas. Teachers on Fridays will have professional development and other resources without missing class time. Retaining and recruiting quality teachers is very important to all school districts during a nationwide teacher shortage, and the Board of Trustees is working diligently at Jasper ISD to look for staff. John Siebold, the superintendent, told Good Morning America that teacher burnout has been an issue for a long time, but since COVID, it seems to have expanded, and it's becoming more and more of an issue. The 4-day work week kind of makes it a little bit more manageable for them because there's so much pressure placed on teachers, he said. As a school district, ultimately, the best thing we can do for kids is to put the best possible teacher in front of them every day. But we have to find them, and we have to keep them. So the district said that a survey of teachers in the school district found that 84% were in favor of a 4-day work week. Another survey emailed to parents and staff and on the school's social media page found that 64% of parents supported a 4-day work week. You know, according to an academic calendar on the district site, the 4-day work week would begin in October and continue through the end of April, with the school year starting with a standard 5-day week in August. And I bet the fact that they have May as 5 days because of this end of year tests. I bet so. Siebold also confirmed that the school district is working with an area food bank to ensure that all students have food to cover the longer weekends. Well, that's good. School districts across the country have faced a shortage of teachers, but also bus drivers and other school staff during the corona pandemic. The National Education Association in February said that there are 567,000 fewer educators in public schools than there were before the pandemic. That's over 500,000 teachers less. So that sort of reminds all of us that making sure we're kind to our kids' teachers, that we send them the message that we value them is really important, because we want to keep them. We want every child to have a content expert and not a substitute or a central staff office person in there, because there are not enough teachers to hire. You know, I think I've told y'all that I have taken that on, and I've formed a company called Lone Star Recruiting, and I go out and go to Puerto Rico and bring back bilingual teachers for districts so that we can, you know, make sure we have certified teachers in front of our kids. So you may not be able to do something as intense as what I'm doing, but at least you can be kind to teachers. You can support them in different ways, and, just make sure that your kids treat them right, you treat them right, and maybe they'll come back next year. Well, all right, everyone. As always, we have quickly run out of time. I hope that you have found some new information about what's happening across the nation in public education. And don't forget to keep writing your legislators. Let them know that you want them to put more money in schools and direct more money to higher salaries for teachers, maybe even somehow lower the workload for teachers. American teachers teach longer days than any other country in the world. Think about that. Teachers usually teach 6+ hours a day. Most other countries only teach 4 or so hours a day. So we are overworking and underpaying our most valuable asset, and that is our kids' teachers. Remember that. Let your legislators know how you feel. All right, everyone. Thanks again. Have a great Easter, and see you back next week. Bye-bye.